How is everyone today? Good. Good to see you all. So we are on, as far as I know, page 704, reading the Master's Birthday. We're starting halfway down the page on 704 if you're following along. Sri Ramakrishna arrived at the Star Theatre on Beedon Street to see a performance of Vishkatetu. He sat in a box facing the south. M and other devotees were near him. Now, Vishvaketu was the son of Karna. I hope many of you might remember Karna from the Mahabharata. He was the man whose armor was part of his body. I saw this in the movie, the Mahabharata. Karna must take off his armor in order to fight. Swami made me watch that at least 6 times. And I'd go, really, Swami? Do I have to see that one again? Anyway, Karna sacrificed his own son to fulfill a promise. So he is considered the real, well, Swami Swahananda said he's the real hero of the Mahabharata. So Ramakrishna is seeing a play about him. Master to M, has Narendra come? M, yes, sir. The performance began. Karna and his wife, Padmavati, sacrificed their son to please God, who had come to them in the guise of a Brahmin to test Karna's charity. During this scene, one of the devotees gave a suppressed sigh. Sri Ramakrishna also expressed his sorrow. After the play, Sri Ramakrishna went to the recreation room of the theater. Girish and Narendra were already there. The master stood near Narendra and said, I have come. Sri Ramakrishna took a seat. The orchestra was playing in the auditorium. Master to the devotees, I feel happy listening to the concert. The musicians used to play on the Sanai at Dakshineshwar, and I would go into ecstasy. Noticing this, a certain sadhu said, this is a sign of the knowledge of Brahman. The orchestra stopped playing, and Sri Ramakrishna began the conversation. Master to Girish, does this theater belong to you? Girish, it is ours, sir. Master, ours is good. It's not good to say mine. People say I and mine. They are egotistic and small-minded people. Narendra, the whole world is a theater. Master, yes, that's right. In some places you see the play of Vidya, and in some the play of Avidya. Narendra, everything is the play of Vidya. Master, true, true. But a man realizes that when he has the knowledge of Brahman. But for a bhakta who follows the path of divine love, both exist. Vidyamaya and Avidyamaya. Please sing a little. Narendra sang, upon the sea of blissful awareness, waves of ecstatic love arise. Rapture divine, play of God's bliss. Oh, how enthralling. Wondrous waves of the sweetness of God, ever new and ever enchanting, rise on the surface, ever assuming forms ever fresh. Then once more, in the great communion, all are merged, as the barrier walls of time and space dissolve and vanish. Dance then, O mind, dance in delight with hands upraised, chanting Lord Hari's holy name. As Narendra sang the words, then once more in the great communion all are merged, Sri Ramakrishna said to him, one realizes this after attaining the knowledge of Brahman. Then all is Vidya, Brahman, as you said. As Narendra sang the line, dance in delight with hands upraised, chanting Lord Hari's holy name, the master said to him, sing that line twice. After the song, Sri Ramakrishna resumed the conversation. Excuse me. Girish, Devendra Babu hasn't come. He says in a mood of wounded pride, we haven't any stuff inside us, so no filling of thickened milk. We are filled only with worthless lentil paste. Why should we go there? Master, surprised. Does he say that? He never said so before. Sri Ramakrishna took some refreshments and handed some to Narendra. Jatindeva to the master, you always say, Narendra, eat this, eat that. Are the rest of us fools? Are we like straw washed ashore by the flood tide? Sri Ramakrishna loved Jatin dearly. Jatin visited the master now and then at Dakshineshwar and occasionally spent the night there. He belonged to an aristocratic family in Shobazar. The master said laughingly to Narendra, he's talking about you. Sri Ramakrishna laughed and showed his affection to Jatin by touching his chin. He said to Jatin, come to Dakshineshwar. I will give you plenty to eat. The master went into the auditorium to see a farce. He sat in a box. He laughed at the conversation of the maidservant. After a while, he became absent-minded and whispered a few words to M. Master to M. Well, is what Girish Ghosh says true? Girish had lately been speaking of Sri Ramakrishna as an incarnation of God. M. Yes, sir, it must be true. Otherwise, why should it appeal to our minds? Master, you see a change is coming over me. The old mood has changed. I'm not able to touch any metal now. M listened to these words in wonder. Master, there is a very deep meaning in this new mood. Was the master hinting that a God-man cannot bear any association with worldly treasure? Master to M. Well, do you notice any change in me? M. In what respect, sir? Master, in my activities. M. Your activities are increasing as more people come to know about you. Master, do you see? What I said before is now coming true. After a few moments, he said, can you tell me why Paltu can't meditate well? Sri Ramakrishna was ready to leave for Dakshineshwar. He had remarked to a devotee about Girish, you may wash 1,000 times a cup that has held a solution of garlic, but is it ever possible to get rid of the smell altogether? Girish was offended by this remark. When the master was about to leave, Girish spoke. Girish, will this smell of garlic go? Master, yes, it will. Girish, so you say it will? Master, all smell disappears when a blazing fire is lighted. If you heat the cup smelling of garlic, you get rid of the smell. It becomes a new cup. The man who says he will not succeed will never succeed. He who feels he is liberated is indeed liberated. And he who feels he is bound verily remains bound. He who forcefully says, I am free, is certainly free. And he who says day and night, I am bound, is certainly bound. That's something for all of us to really think about. Always accentuate the positive in the fact that you will be free. You are free already. It is true. We're trying to, chapter 37 now, the Master and Narendra. Sunday, March 1st, 1885. Sri Ramakrishna was seated on the small couch in his room, absorbed in deep samadhi. Mahimacharan, Ram, Manamohan, Nabai Chaitanya, M, and other devotees were sitting on a mat spread on the floor. They were watching the master intently. It was the day of the Dola Yatra, a Hindu religious festival. Sri Krishna and Radha are the central figures of this celebration, their images being placed on a swing which is rocked now and then. A red powder is showered on the images. Later, friends and relatives throw the powder at one another. This festival is celebrated when winter passes into spring on a full moon day, rendered doubly sacred by its association with the birth of Sri Chaitanya. The devotees saw that the master was returning to consciousness of the world, though his mind still lingered in the realm of God vision. The master said to Mahimacharan, "My dear sir, please tell us something about the love of God." Mahimacharan chanted the following lines from the Narada Pancharatra. What need is there of penance if God is worshipped with love? What is the use of penance if God is not worshipped with love? What need is there of penance if God is seen within and without? What is the use of penance if God is not seen within and without? O Brahman, O my child, cease from practicing further penances. Hasten to Shankara, the ocean of heavenly wisdom. Obtain from him the love of God, the pure love praised by devotees, which snaps in twain the shackles that bind you to the world. Mahima said, once, while the great sage Narada was practicing austerity, he suddenly heard a heavenly voice repeating these lines. Master, there are two classes of devotees, Jivakotis or ordinary men, and Ishvarakotis or divine messengers. The Jivakotis devotion is called Vaidhi, formal. That is, it conforms to scriptural laws. He worships God with a fixed number of articles, repeats God's holy name a specified number of times, and so on and so forth. This kind of devotion, like the path of knowledge, leads to the knowledge of God and to samadhi. The Jivakoti does not return from samadhi to the relative plane. But the case of the Ishvarakoti is different. He follows the process of negation and affirmation. First, he negates the world, realizing that it is not Brahman. And then he affirms the same world, seeing it as the manifestation of Brahman. To give an illustration, a man wanting to climb to the roof first negates the stairs as not being the roof. But on reaching the roof, he finds that the stairs are made of the same materials as the roof, brick, lime, and brick dust. Then he can either move up and down the stairs or remain on the roof as he pleases. Shukadev was absorbed in samadhi, Nirvikalpa samadhi, Jada samadhi. Since Shuka was to recite the Bhagavata to King Parikshit, the Lord sent the sage Narada to him. Narada saw him seated like an inert thing, absolutely unconscious of the world around him. Thereupon, Narada sang 4 couplets on the beauty of Hari to the accompaniment of the Veena. While the first couplet was being sung, the hair on Shuka's body stood on end. Next, he shed tears, for he saw the form of God, the embodiment of spirit within himself, in his heart. Thus, Shukadev saw the form of God, even after Jada Samadhi. He was an Ishvarakoti. Hanuman, after having the vision of God both with form and without, remained firmly devoted to the form of Rama, the embodiment of consciousness and bliss. Prahlada sometimes realized, I am he. Sometimes he felt that he was the servant of God. How can such a person live without love of God? That is why he must accept the relationship of master and servant, feeling that God is the master and himself the servant. This enables him to enjoy the bliss of Hari. In this attitude, he feels that God is the bliss and he himself is the enjoyer. The ego of devotion, the ego of knowledge, and the ego of a child do no harm to the devotee. Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge. The ego of a child is not attached to anything. The child is beyond the three gunas. He is not under the control of any of them. One moment you find him angry, the next moment it is all over. One moment you see him building his playhouse, the next moment he forgets all about it. Now you see him love his playmates, but if they are out of his sight a few days, he forgets all about them. A child is not under the control of any of the gunas, sattva, rajas, or tamas. The bhakta feels, O God, thou art the Lord and I am thy devotee. This I is the ego of bhakti. Why does such a lover of God retain the ego of devotion? There is a reason. The ego cannot be got rid of, so let the rascal remain as a servant of God, the devotee of God. You may reason 1,000 times, but you cannot get rid of the ego. The ego is like a pitcher, and Brahman like the ocean, an infinite expanse of water on all sides. The pitcher is set in this ocean. The water is both inside and out. The water is everywhere, yet the pitcher remains. Now this pitcher is the ego of the devotee. As long as the ego remains, you and I remain. And there also remains the feeling, O God, thou art the Lord and I am thy devotee. Thou art the master and I am thy servant. You may reason 1,000,000 times, but you cannot get rid of it. But it is different if there is no pitcher. Narendra entered the room and saluted the master. They began to talk together. Presently, the master came down from the couch and sat on the floor, on which a mat had been spread. In the meantime, the room had become filled with people, both devotees and visitors. Master to Narendra, are you well? I hear that you often visit Girish Ghosh at his house. Is it true? Narendra, yes, sir. I go there now and then. Girish had been visiting Sri Ramakrishna for some months. The master said that none could fathom the depth of Girish's faith, and his longing for God was as intense as his faith was deep. At home, he was always absorbed in the thought of Sri Ramakrishna. Many of the master's devotees visited him. They talked only about Sri Ramakrishna. But Girish was a householder who had had varied experiences of worldly life. And the master knew that Narendra would renounce the world, that he would shun lust and greed, both mentally and outwardly. Master, do you visit Girish frequently? No matter how much one washes a cup that has contained a solution of garlic, still a trace of the smell will certainly linger. The youngsters who come here are pure souls, untouched by lust and greed. Men who have associated a long time with lust and greed smell of the garlic, as it were. They are like a mango pecked by crows. Such a fruit cannot be offered to the deity in the temple. and you would hesitate to eat it yourself. Again, take the case of a new pot and another in which curd has been made. One is afraid to keep milk in the second pot, for the milk very often turns sour. Householder devotees like Girish form a class by themselves. They desire yoga and also bhoga, enjoyment. Their attitude is that of Ravana, who wanted to enjoy the maidens of heaven and at the same time realize Rama. They are like the Asuras, the demons, who enjoy various pleasures and also realize Narayana, Narendra. But Girish has given up his old associates. Master, yes. He is like a bull castrated in old age. In Burdwan, I once saw an ox moving around among the cows. I asked a bullock cart driver, "What is this, an ox? How strange." He said to me, "True, sir, but it was castrated in old age, and so it hasn't shaken off the old tendencies." In a certain place, there sat some sannyasis. A young woman happened to pass by. All continued as before to meditate on God, except one of them, who cast sidelong glances at her. Before becoming a monk, he had been the father of 3 children. If you make a solution of garlic in a cup, won't it be hard to remove the smell from it? Can a worthless tree like the babui produce mangoes? Of course, such a thing may become possible through the occult powers of a yogi, but can everyone acquire such powers? When have worldly people time to think of God? A man wanted to engage a pundit who could explain the Bhagavata to him. His friend said, "I know of an excellent pundit, but there's one difficulty. He does a great deal of farming. He has 4 plows and 8 bullocks and is always busy with them. He has no leisure." Thereupon the man said, "I don't care for a pundit who has no leisure. I am not looking for a Bhagavata scholar burdened with plows and bullocks. I want a pundit who can really expound the sacred book to me." There was a king who used to listen daily to a pundit's exposition of the Bhagavata. Every day at the end of their study, the pundit would ask the king, "O king, have you understood what I have read?" To this question, the king would daily give the same reply, "Sir, you had better understand it first yourself." Each day when the pundit returned home, he would ponder the meaning of the king's words. He was a pious man devoted to prayer and meditation. Gradually, he came to his senses and realized that the only real thing in the world is the lotus feet of God, and that all else is illusory. He felt dispassion for the world and took up the life of a monk. As he was leaving the world, he sent a man to the king with the message, "Yes, O king, now I have understood." But do I look down on worldly people? Of course not. When I see them, I apply the knowledge of Brahman, the oneness of existence. Brahman itself has become everything. All are Narayan himself. Regarding all women as so many forms of the Divine Mother, I see no difference between a chaste woman and a streetwalker. Alas, I find no customers who want anything better than Kalai Pulse. No one wants to give up lust and greed. Man, deluded by the beauty of woman and the power of money, forgets God. But to one who has seen the beauty of God, even the position of Brahma, the creator, seems insignificant. A man said to Ravana, "You have been going to Sita in different disguises. Why don't you go in the form of Rama?" But Ravana replied, when I meditate on Rama in my heart, the most beautiful women, celestial maidens like Ramba and Tilatama, appear no better than ashes of the funeral pyre. Then even the position of Brahma appears trivial to me, not to speak of the beauty of another man's wife. Alas, I find that all the customers here seek worthless kalaipals. Unless the soul is pure, it cannot have genuine love of God and single-minded devotion to the ideal. A man wanders away to various objects. To Manamohan, you may take offense at my words, but I said to Rakal, I would rather hear that you had drowned yourself in the Ganges than learn that you had accepted a job under another person and become his servant. One day, a Nepalese girl came here. She sang devotional songs to the company of the Esraj. When someone asked her if she was married, she said sharply, what? I am the handmaid of God. Whom else could I serve? How can a man living in the midst of lust and greed realize God? It is very hard for him to lead an unattached life. First, he is the slave of his wife. Second, of money. And third, of the master whom he serves. When Akbar was emperor of Delhi, there lived a hermit in a hut in the forest. Many people visited the holy man. At one time, he felt a great desire to entertain his visitors. But how could he do so without money? So he decided to go to the emperor for help. At the gate of Akbar's palace, for the gate of Akbar's palace was always open to holy men. The hermit entered the palace while the emperor was at his daily devotions and took a seat in a corner of the room. He heard the emperor conclude his worship with the prayer, "O God, give me money, give me riches," and so on and so forth. When the hermit heard this, he was about to leave the prayer hall, but the emperor signed to him to wait. When the prayer was over, Akbar said to him, "You came to see me. How is it that you were about to leave without saying anything to me?" "Your Majesty need not trouble yourself about it," answered the hermit. "I must leave now." When the emperor insisted, the hermit said, "Many people visit my hut, and so I came here to ask you for some money." Then said Akbar, "Why are you going away without speaking to me?" The hermit replied, "I found that you too were a beggar. You too prayed to God for money and riches. Thereupon I said to myself, why should I beg of a beggar? If I must beg, let me beg from God." And I think we'll stop there because I don't see another place to really stop. Any questions or discussion? Anyone have anything they'd like to say? Okay, well, it's good to see all of you this evening. And tomorrow, I hope you catch Pravrajika lecture on fearlessness. It will be on Zoom and on YouTube, streamed live. So we'll end with the chant. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.